couldn't. But that wall is very beat up. I don't know what happened. I feel like a child ran around with like a thumbtack and just poked the wall a million times. So it's gonna look a little bit, it looks like snowfall actually. It's kind of like snowy background, a little bit, you know, maybe it looks like it's kind of on purpose, maybe. I don't know. But just FYI, that's what the wall looks like. I am aware. It's temporary. We're getting it painted. And yeah, how you guys doing? Happy Friday. What's going on? I taught a class earlier today. So I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to like live stream like 2 hours later. So here we are. Streamers that can stream for like 8 hours and like talk the whole time, that's like a type of endurance that I don't fully understand. And hats off to them. And clapping for them. I just can't do it. Oh, by the way, I have my nails. I painted my nails. Or I got my nails painted, actually. They're kind of like a fall brown, grungy color. I've been doing a lot of gardening outside, so actually, like, this hand is a little bit beat up, but this hand, actually, this is like 4 days old. Look at this. It's hanging out all right. All right, so before we get into it, just some like, as per usual, just some basic stuff to know. One, let me know if you guys can hear me. It's obviously very important. And then the rest of the stuff, 18 plus only, like it says right there. If you're not at least 18, please do not be here. That's for everyone's safety, my safety, your safety, everyone in the chat's safety, because mixing minors and adults and BDSM and all of this all together is generally not a good plan. This is in general an interactive Q&A, so I do have some topic suggestions in the title. I did just teach a BDSM 101 class, and just in case there was anyone who took that class today and had some follow-up questions, I wanted to make sure they knew they were in the right place. So if you want to have a little bit of a further conversation about BDSM 101 topics or anything you guys want to know about, it is also Asexuality Awareness Week. It is also, I don't even know, something else probably. It's like poly related. I don't know. Poly stuff, asexuality stuff, BDSM, kink, newbie, experienced, relationship problems, whatever it is, that is what we're talking about today, whatever you guys want to talk about. And then we do have some rules and an FAQ down below you can check out, and then that is just the best way to know what's going on. Really simple. Basically, no medical information, don't give healthcare advice, don't spam the chat. I do answer questions in the order they come in, so if you do want to make sure I get to yours, ask it early, because I don't typically have time to get to absolutely everything, though I do try my best. And basically check out the resources. I believe it's already been pointed out. There are resources below if you guys want to know, like, hey, what kind of vlogger should I buy? What books should I read? What movies do you recommend? All that is linked down below if you want to check it out. I can't believe, I think I missed last Friday. Oh, it's lower than recommend? Okay, wait. Give me a hot second here. My bitrate is apparently not where it should be at. Ooh, I see what I did. Yeah, that's definitely not right. It should be like, I don't even know what it should be at, but definitely higher. We'll bump it up. Oh, yeah, that's like a tenth of what it should be. All right, let's get that fixed so you guys can see me in full HD quality, hopefully. All right, I think that should fix it. All right, I'm just gonna really quickly let people on Twitter know that we're streaming, and we'll get into some questions. Not really anything interesting or like exciting BDSM wise going on in my life currently. I might be going to a convention for Veterans Day weekend. I haven't like fully made the decision if I'm gonna go yet or not. I would like to go. I'm just worried about if it's actually gonna, like, I don't know, flu's really bad this year, a bunch of stuff's really bad this year. I just don't know if it makes sense because I'd have to travel to go to it, so I don't know. And then there is, I'm probably going to be going to an open house in November for like a new dungeon space that I haven't been to before. So that's what's going on in my BDSM life currently. Just not quite back up to full speed as of yet, going to events. I'd like to. And I'm definitely getting back into teaching stuff because I taught a class today, and then I am in communication with a couple of places to teach some more classes probably after the holiday season is, I think, what we're currently looking at. But yeah. Great webinar tonight, Evie. It was actually very helpful. Great. I'm so happy to hear that. I get nervous when I teach, especially because that class that I taught today, the BDSM 101 class, I normally do that in like 2 hours. And I had to teach it in an hour and a half. And then also I know from who I was working on that with, like the group of people that came to the class had like no BDSM knowledge. So I just spent like a lot of time on like the basics. And now that I've kind of gone through it again, I think I need to like reorder some of the slides and maybe like, I like every single time I do a class, I always think about ways I could be doing it better. And so now I'm thinking, okay, if I'm doing this class again, what would I do next time that would be different? And that's what I'm thinking about. My day has been very, very busy, Christian. I did a class earlier today. I did some gardening. I finished a video. I posted a video. I'm streaming. I don't know if I'm like what my headspace is going to be like when I'm done streaming. I don't know if I'm just going to like just completely fall asleep or like what's going to happen. Because I have other stuff I need / want to do today. But I did want to get some gardening stuff done beforehand because obviously by the time my stream's done, it's going to be dark outside. So had to get up bright and early for that, finishing that. I'm trying to get my like garden ready for winter time. And like it's a lot. It's so much like work. I need to actually go to a gardening center and get stuff, and I just don't. I'm not even gonna do anything for Halloween this year, I don't think, which is like I basically right as soon as it turned to fall weather here, where I was like, oh, we can go get pumpkins, I had to go on like a family thing for like a couple days and like take care of some family stuff, and then I came back and now it's like I have so much Halloween stuff I gotta get ready to do for like content that I don't know if I'm actually gonna do anything in my personal life for Halloween. Not going to a Halloween party. I might just like dress up. I don't even know if I'm gonna do that. I think I'm getting a facial done on Halloween. I think I'm gonna get a facial done and then like wear my like dog kigurumi, and then I don't even know. Like just watch a movie, I guess, probably. I should see if like I know anyone that would want, because I'm doing a movie night for Patreon. We're watching Hocus Pocus 2. And it would be really great if I could watch like my classic Halloween movies, because I bought Halloween Town, and it'd be nice to get to watch some like classic Halloween stuff. That's probably what I will end up doing. Maybe I'll get some like, because Halloween is Monday, right? And it's like I do normally stream on Mondays, but it would be fun to do like, I'm really in the mood for like craft projects. It would be really fun to make like homemade toffee apples, or like, because I don't really have I live with roommates, and so I can't really do like, the kitchen is like a communal space, and so I can't really like, I don't have to, like, it's also completely opposite side of the house where I'm at currently. I don't really have like the capacity to do like kitchen streams, look at me like while we make a Halloween thing together sort of deal. It'd be fun to do that. Like, I'd like to do a costume and like wear something comfy and like make Halloween goodies. And we might get trick-or-treaters as well. I'm actually not sure because I've only lived here like for a couple months. I don't know if this place will get trick-or-treaters, but I feel like it will. So I don't know. Lots of undecided Halloween things, because I feel like it just was like, it felt like it was like July until 6 days ago, more or less, which I don't have a problem with. I love a long hot summer. I will not besmirch that at all. But it just like fall happened, you know. Question. I've been considering ethical non-monogamy, and I just wanted to know if you have any ideas how to get comfortable with the idea. So that is such an interesting question, because I think you can, let me know if this makes sense, because it might not. I feel like sometimes you realize on like a logical level that non-monogamy makes sense for like your lifestyle, your availability, what you want in a partner, like all that stuff. But then getting comfortable with it is very difficult. And sometimes it's like, well, I'm okay with like an open relationship for me, but like my partner seeing other people makes me feel insecure, and I didn't know how to deal with that part. I think what really, because I was not somebody who was like naturally inclined towards polyamory or anything like that really at all. How did I even find out about it? I sort of like, without meaning to, kind of opened up a relationship near around the time when I started exploring BDSM, even though we had no idea there was a community for it, no idea. It just was like practically with like the distance, and then I had graduated college, and then they were staying in the college town and they weren't able to move, and blah blah blah. Like it just made sense about like, okay, well, like we're going to be long distance, and we were young, we're like 22, 20, 21 years old. Why would we want to restrain ourselves from like getting to experience other stuff, basically? And so that's how I opened up a relationship, but I didn't really learn about like there being like the concept of polyamory as like a community thing, or something that had literature around it or advice or anything like that at all, until I was already doing that for like a couple months, I think. And then I think what helped me be more comfortable with it as like, you know, kind of understanding what it was like and how to navigate that emotionally, and what it really was like on a day-to-day basis, not just like the fantasy of like, wouldn't it be cool to have a third, or like whatever it is that people would normally assume happens. I think just like reading books was really helpful for me. Like I read a lot of like the kind of the classic poly literature. I read More Than Two, Opening Up, Building Designer Relationships, like all the books, right? I just read everything I could find, more or less, that was on like my partner's Kindle already. Especially I'd read one of my partners had a Kindle, and I read some of the books that they had on there. So I think that helped me. And then I knew a lot of people in my personal life that were poly, and then that also helped too, because then it like made it real. You know, it wasn't like they wanted to be poly with me, but they just were poly, and they had partners who were poly, and I could kind of see the way that they navigated their open relationship and what they did, and like when it worked and when it didn't. But if you don't have that, obviously it's a lot harder. So I don't know, I feel like it's a combination of like time and getting to know people, and like if you can't get to know people, then like reading books and like reading people's stories is really helpful. Yeah, there's a ton of respiratory stuff going on currently. I don't know, there's something called RSV, there's a really nasty bird flu, there's a what else is going on? There's actual just regular human flu. I don't think I've been hit with anything. I traveled recently to go take care of some family stuff, and I did feel kind of crappy after that, but I feel better now. I think it was just the very sudden, like, I was in a completely different climate. It was like 20, 30 degrees colder than what I was used to for the past like couple months. And then it just sudden shift overnight. And then I think coming back again, they just sort of wore me out, because it was all very like sudden. But yeah, respiratory stuff is no joke this year. All right, we're having some Brat slander happen. What's happening with Brats? Why are we slandering the Brats? What did they do? What did they do this time? Brats are the worst. Well, you spelled it worst like bratwurst. So are you saying they're like sausages? Like Brats are like, I don't actually know what the word worst actually means in like German or whatever that is. I'm actually kind of curious to know, what does worst mean? It just means German or Austrian sausage. Does that mean? Yeah, from German Wurst. Oh, it just means a sausage. Okay, any kind of sausage, I think. Interesting. The more you know about foreign languages. So, yeah, I guess you could say brats are like sausages. I think rolling them up like a burrito is like highly effective if you want to know how to tame a brat, I feel like that's a pretty good technique. Oh.
I was never poly until I had a rebound fling with the person who ended up becoming my best friend.
Oh.
But tend to attract poly people, so I tolerate it.
Yeah, poly's definitely not for everyone. I never like I'm sort of poly by like choice. Like I don't really feel naturally inclined to poly. I don't feel like polyamory speaks to like some truth about my spirit that like monogamous relationships can't possibly encompass. Like I don't really feel like it's some people feel very strongly it's an identity and that they couldn't be monogamous. It would make them very deeply unhappy. But for me, I do feel like it is a practical choice because I am into BDSM. I am asexual. And so a lot of BDSM people are also poly, for one. And then also, like, because I'm asexual, if I had to date monogamously, that would very much limit my dating pool of people that would be happy dating an ace person. So it's much more practical for me than like a deeply personal spiritual thing, but everyone has their own way of relating to that. You're right there, Rob. She can be a pain at times. Okay, did I miss a question from William? I feel like there was somebody named William who left a question, and I think I just missed whatever the question was. So if you're still here with us, if you're still among us, William, please retype the question because it seems like something about a brat and then like needing correction and then like doesn't like the taming process. I would love to be able to help with that. It sounds like a predicament that we can definitely assist with. So let me know in case I missed it because the chat goes by pretty fast sometimes. Okay, let's say it was like a fairly broad question. Yeah, if you have like something specific, if it's like, what is BDSM? That's going to take forever. If it's like, I have a brat and this is our relationship and this is the problem I have, help me with it. I can definitely help with that. Since the title of this vid... Ooh. I thought it was going to be good for a second. No. How do I mess up drinking tea? How is that possible? How do I do that? Since the title of this vid is BDSM for beginners, have any tips on attending your first munch? I do. So munches are awesome, and I think they seem a lot scarier than they really are. So just kind of briefly for people who maybe don't know what a munch is. A munch is a non-sexual, low-pressure, public gathering of kinky folks in typically a vanilla space like a cafe or a restaurant or something where you can just meet up typically during the week to just talk and like connect with people. And I think they're really great because it's a way to connect with your local scene without having to go and play. And there's a lot less pressure. There's no nudity. There's no, like, people aren't going to come on to you. Or they shouldn't anyways. They shouldn't, like, come on to you, hit on you or anything like that. If they are, that's, like, the wrong munch vibe. Though there are places, certainly, for speed dating events. And, you know, the time and the place has to be right. So I would say the number one things that you can do when you're attending your first munch is definitely, like, if munch is on FetLife and you don't really know a whole lot about it, definitely read the rules. Reach out to the organizers, let them know, hey, I'm new here, it's going to be my first munch. Any advice? You know, just kind of confirm the address. You know, like, what's the environment like? What kind of people are there? And, like, see who is RSVP'd, right? Because that'll tell you a lot about the munch. If it's a munch where it's, like, 5 people and they all have blank profiles and it's at, like, a pretty sleazy bar or whatever, that might not be a fun time compared to, like, let's say you're 25 and you want to meet similarly aged people and you look at the RSVPs and it's all people like 18 to 30, right? And it's like 10 to 20 people, maybe a little bit more. It seems to be at like kind of a fun, hip place or like a restaurant and kind of the queer part of the city or whatever. And it just seems like it's going to be a little bit of a better fit. Definitely, like, make sure, like, that they have rules and guidelines. And if you're kind of nervous about what to talk about, a good munch, if it's organized well, should involve some kind of facilitation by the people organizing the event. That should be something like they have like cue cards, like the Kink Academy, for example. They have like a set of like question cards for like kink stuff that like you can have a conversation around in like quiet but like polite company, you know, like I'm trying to think of an example of like a card. It was like, what's your ideal aftercare, right? And then you can have a conversation about aftercare. But the point is, there should be some kind of facilitating conversation happening by whoever the organizers are. They should be visible. And typically, in my experience, the munches I've gone to across different towns, across different points in my life, they've all been very welcoming. And then when they see new people, it tends to be more group focused, I guess. And so you get more kind of like incorporated into the group dynamic, and people go, oh, hey, you know, who are you, blah blah blah, and you have a conversation and you say, oh, I'm new here, it's my first time, and typically everyone's always really friendly. But as that is not a guarantee, I would say a good fallback is like if you have like a fandom of something you're really into, or like you're really into like video games or like certain anime, like whatever it is, right? If you have a fandom, if you have a thing you're into, Star Wars, Star Trek, Full Metal Alchemist, My Little Pony, I don't give a shit, whatever it is. You can wear something related to that, like maybe pins or a lanyard or a t-shirt or something on your backpack, something to kind of give somebody to start a conversation with. And that is really helpful because oftentimes people do want to start to approach and talk to a new person, but when they don't know anything about you, a lot of people struggle to know what the opening line should be, especially when you're trying not to flirt with somebody, because you can go for the, oh, I like your hair, or your outfit seems really cool, or, you know, what are you here for? But that can very easily be read as or accidentally said like flirtation. And so giving somebody another way to kind of like connect with you on maybe a shared thing that you both like, that just makes things a lot easier. And then for new people, I do recommend attending early. If the munch is held from like, let's say like 6 to 8, you know, same as my live stream, I really recommend coming in early because the longer the munch goes on, at least, and this is very like every place on the planet has different ways of thinking about attendance and timeliness. But where I live in the US, at least, the way that most people attend munches is they kind of trickle in over the course of the time the munch is happening, because it's usually during the week, and so people have babysitters and dog sitters, and they have weird work hours, and they got to run errands, and so a lot of people just kind of stop in when they can, and they might not all show up at 6, which means if you're newer, it's much easier to get like recognized by the organizer, easier to start conversations if you come in earlier when there's less people and they haven't been like conversing for an hour already. Because if you get a bunch of friends together and they've known each other for years, and like they've been having a conversation for an hour, it's typically a lot harder for new people to break into that than like at the beginning before any like solid conversations have started. So that's my advice for munches. But really the most important thing, more than anything else other than maybe vetting to make sure it's not like, I don't, some weird, like, I don't even know what it would be, like when you vetted it and you found it as a real event, the other most important thing besides that is just have the bravery to go. You don't have to stay for the whole time. You can go early. You can come back whenever you want. You can go take a break in the bathroom and go for a walk around the block. You can do whatever you need to, but you're under no obligation to stay for the whole time and under no obligation to like it either. So the most important part is just having the bravery to go and do it and try it and see if you like it. If you get the bravery to go for 10 minutes, that is more than most people can do. A lot of people end up like sitting on the sidelines of wishing they could try BDSM, but they're too nervous, they're too scared, and they never actually get to try it, and then the window kind of passes them by, and then they get too busy or they start having kids and they never really get to do it. And so if you have the possibility to do it now, if you can just find that little kernel of bravery, that will be very helpful. I'm sick too for the second time in a row, and it's really hot in my city. I think this will be a really bad summer. Oh, are you down under? Or you're like Australia, New Zealand. I like everything just going around right now, I swear. What does everyone have against brats? We're just as valid as anyone else. Yes. Listen, we love brats in this house. Okay. Brats are valid. I don't necessarily like choose to play with brats above and beyond any other type of BDSM person. But like, I don't know, like almost more than littles. I get comments from people on videos and live streams about like, oh my god, brats are the worst. Brats aren't real submissives. What are you even doing? There's blah blah blah. And like, I know so many people that love playing with brats. They're just like, brats are fun. Brats let them do all kinds of crazy stuff, and they love it, and everyone has a fun time. But for some reason, everyone on the internet is like, I don't like brats. Meanwhile, like every other person I know in the BDSM community, including organizers, including educators, are brats. So like, they're here to stay, unfortunately. Sorry. That being said, though, brats are certainly not for everyone. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, bratting is not a big deal. Everyone loves bratting. That's not true, right? It doesn't matter what kind of BDSM you do. If it's role play, sissy stuff, age play, pet play, service submission, heavy impact play, blood play. Doesn't matter what it is. There will always be people that love it and are into it. And there will always be people that are like, I don't get it. That's gross. That's weird. Why do people do that? That's gross. That's not real BDSM. And we all got to figure out how to live together under one roof. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I will try to get to as many questions as possible. This is true. Missed out on early career tonight. Oh, I was deep into listening to Pink Floyd. Howdy. I mean, listen, I grew up listening to Pink Floyd. It was like my dad's favorite music. Like, I swear to God, half of our Christmas, we had like a camcorder, and like half of our Christmas like home videos are like Pink Floyd's in the background. It was like Pink Floyd or like, oh gosh, what's the Siberian Orchestra? Something Siberian. I feel like that's not like, is that Trans-Siberian Orchestra? That's what it is. Can't say that on YouTube these days, though. It's got the word trans in it. YouTube doesn't like that at all. Sad to say. I will not be tying anyone to anyone's desks. You will be here of your own free will. Oh, you're in Argentina. Oh, that's true. People are like, oh, Argentina, it's warm. It's South America. And it's like, that's not how that works. I mean, there are parts of Argentina that are closer to the equator and ones that are farther away. What do you think about polygamy? I'm gonna do a little educational moment here, as is this whole stream, I guess. So polygamy and polyamory are not the same thing culturally. People use the terms synonymously, but polygamy is essentially used in like religious circles of typically Christian fundamentalists, and I assume some of the religions as well, probably like Islam and things. But in my knowledge base, at least, polygamy is a typically religious, patriarchal belief system where it's either very masculine or like promised by God that men are supposed to have multiple wives, and the women don't really have any say in it, and they don't really marry or get to be with more than one person themselves. And it's typically like unfair. The people I knew that grew up in like polygamous households or grew up around polygamy are not typically fans. And polyamory is separate from that. It does involve multiple partners, but instead it's not based on any kind of like gender belief or religious ideology, where instead it's about people can choose to have consensual, healthy, open relationships where everyone can date whoever they want in any combination that they negotiate to. That could be anything from like complete relationship anarchy over to like finding a third for like a closed triad relationship. So it's a really, really broad spectrum. And sometimes that does look like, you know, a single male figure having sort of a harem of multiple female partners, but it's not based on a religious belief, and it's not based on like some kind of misogynistic sense of like masculine superiority. It's just like, this is how it worked out, you know, this is this is what we want is consensual. People can leave at any time. It's not like you're not going to get ostracized if you leave the community or what have you. So I think that polygamy is probably not the best. Polyamory is fine, and if people want to do that, great, but it doesn't make anyone, like, polyamory doesn't make you any better or, like, more woke or more, like, I don't even know, like, what sort of stereotypes do people have about, like, poly people. I feel like people that are poly get, like, perceived as being, like, kind of high and mighty and be like, I'm so woke and advanced as a human being because I'm polyamorous and I have all, you know, I've released myself from the restraints and confines of evil, terrible monogamy. That's actually blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't believe in any of that. It's just a different way of having a relationship. It's a different way of, having relationships, I suppose. It's a different way of developing intimacy, I guess. And that's all it really has to be. I feel like I don't hold this mug very delicately. I don't know. Is this like a terrible way of holding a mug? I don't know. Somebody's gonna tell me an opinion about how I'm holding my mug, I'm sure. It's Ace Awareness Week. What do you think of queer platonic relationships? Do they mix with kink at all? So I actually have a video that I did a couple of years ago now on queer platonic relationships, and I think they're awesome. I'm not in one myself currently. I'm totally open to that being a thing, but I don't like actively pursue that over like romantic relationships, I guess, because I do very much care about romance and romantic relationships. And I actually think that queer platonic relationships are a really great framework for understanding BDSM relationships, especially power exchange, where you don't have underlying romance attached to it. Because a lot of people, especially if you're looking like 50 Shades of Grey and blah blah blah, like it's almost always heterosexual, monogamous, committed pairing where, you know, they fall in love and this and that and the other. But a lot of people don't really want that. They feel more comfortable, you know, with someone they trust, but they don't want a romantic entanglement, or like BDSM is just like not a romantic thing for them. And so I think that queer platonic relationships are absolutely a really great framework that you can use like alongside BDSM to sort of think about the ways in which you can be very intimate and be very bonded, have a high level of trust, have a high level of commitment without it being focused around this like single sexual, romantic, kind of stereotypical, traditional relationship structure. Polygamy and polyamory are different. You're correct. I just went over that. You are correct. How to introduce the idea of a scene. Many times partners describe the desires that they want to execute but never follow to start a scene. What is the best place for a first BDSM scene? Let me think about this for a second. There's like a couple of different things. So there's introducing the idea of a scene, but then they talk about the scene and they describe what they want, but they never execute on it. And then what is the best place? Like literally, where should you do a scene, like in terms of a location? Or like, what's the best place to start with? Like, what kind of BDSM scenes are good to start with? I'll kind of answer this in like a couple of different ways, depending on what I interpret may be the most helpful from your question to like have answers to. So I think that describing the desires is a good place to start. And I think if you have a partner that is just describing their desires, but then you never move into like a scene space, I think it's sort of important to check in on like, okay, are we just sharing fantasies as like dirty talk and that's all you ever want it to be? Is it, you know, you got to figure out, okay, where is the breakdown in communication, right? Because if you're thinking, well, we talked about what we both want, why aren't we having a scene? They might have thought about it like, oh, we're just sharing desires for like a fun thing to do because it's like vulnerable and that's what partners do, but I don't really want to do any of this. or they might be too nervous to ask for a scene, or they maybe just want to share fantasies and have it only ever be a fantasy, right? So I think it's really important to make sure you have clear expectations and understandings about, okay, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And maybe you do just share desires, and then you have a separate process where it's like, okay, now we talked about the desires. How do we kind of take this amorphous cloud of things that we potentially like and wrangle it into an actual scene? So I think it's maybe how I would think about it is, okay, you have like the desire sharing, fantasy sharing. This is what we kind of both think about, and what, what we like, what turns us on, what seems interesting, what fascinates us, like whatever it is. Having that conversation, then having a follow-up conversation about like, hey, some of these ideas seem really awesome. I would love to get to try them in person. Like, I would love to try them with you. Like, what do you think about that? And I think when you get really concrete with like, I want to actually do this with you, then you can't, well, at least it's harder to have that confusion around like, oh, why do we only ever talk about desires, but then never actually do the thing? Because now you've made it very concrete that, no, this is like, I genuinely, like, I want to plan to do this. Like, I love getting to talk about our fantasies. I think we have a lot of overlap with what we both like. I think it would be really fun to get to experiment, like trying this for real. Like, what do you think of that? And then if they say yes to that, or at the very least, if they're kind of like, maybe, but I'd want to have more details, then you can get more into the actual like planning of a scene. Now, if you have an existing partnership, that's a lot easier, because then you like, it's not a random guy you met on Craigslist. Like, you're pretty confident he's not gonna like axe murder you as soon as he gets the opportunity, So that has some benefits to it. I think that playing in public at like a dungeon, which you can find those on Fat Life, lots of ways to find dungeons, that can be really fun, but it can be expensive and it can be time consuming. But the benefit of that is if all you commit to is going to the dungeon, but not necessarily a particular scene, that means you get the chance to just like watch people, see what other folks are doing, and kind of figure out, okay, is this really for me or not, without having to like try it out for yourself first. And the energy and the environment of a dungeon can be really conducive to having some really amazing scenes. So I would also make sure to like, if it's possible, I would maybe think about going to a dungeon. But you can also totally play at home, in which case, like, okay, you're not really going to get the benefit of like watching people and getting just kind of like, experience watching stuff together before doing it on your own. But I think what that lets you do instead is it means you're in a familiar place. Other people aren't going to watch you. You're less afraid of being judged. Like, there are some pros to this. So then when it comes to like, okay, what sort of scene do we do now that we kind of know where we're going to do it? And really the best place is wherever you feel comfortable, right? That could be your bedroom. That could be renting an Airbnb. That could be going to a dungeon. It's where you feel comfortable doing this at. That's the most important thing, not finding the exact perfect place. It's about what mentally feels right for you to do. Then when you get into actually doing the scene, I think a first scene should not really be like a super elaborate experience. I think it's really a learning experience. It's kind of like a little teachable BDSM moment. And so I would think of something that's like maybe not more than like 20 minutes long, maybe more like 10 to 15, something really simple. Like, stick to just like one thing at a time, right? Like, just spanking, just wearing a blindfold, just wearing a collar, like something that is simple, cheap, easy to do, and lets you very much just kind of go at your own pace and not do too many things at once. Because though it can seem really fun and tempting to do this and this and this and this and this and try everything you've always wanted to try in all your fantasies, if something goes wrong or doesn't feel right or turns you off in some way, it can be much harder to identify what it was that caused that feeling if you're doing 50 different things. Whereas when you're only doing one thing, you can fairly confidently say, okay, like, I'm not really into spanking, or this doesn't seem as interesting as I thought it would, or whatever. And so I recommend keeping it simple, keeping it short. Don't do things that impede your ability to communicate. So, like, don't wear a gag, don't put tape over their mouth, don't play super loud music. Give easy ways to communicate, check in often, and just use it as a learning experience to see how you both feel about it, and then just be like really honest. And so, yeah, I think if I had to guess at sort of where the breakdown is on this, like how to actually do a scene, is I think somebody here has to be willing to take that step to be like, hey, talking about desires is really awesome. Like, can we try to make this real? And like set a date, set a time, like, you know, the same way you would set up like an actual date, right? Like you can talk about, oh, I'd love to go out with you, but until you actually make that a reality and put, you know, make them put their money where their mouth is and say, okay, we're going out to dinner on Friday at 6:00, you got to kind of force their hand a little bit and go, okay, great, I love to talk with you about BDSM, but I actually want to try this, and so I would love it if we had a scene like next Saturday, you know? And that is the direction I would personally go in. Okay, I see a question I kind of want to answer, but I don't think I'm gonna get to it if I just wait. So I'm just gonna say it, and I'm gonna answer a question out of order. I am a heterosexual woman, but I'm curious in dating women. Does that mean you're heterosexual? I don't know. Does it? How can I be sure that I want to try casual poly relationships with sex only? How do I go about meeting people to okay, what's happening? So you're heterosexual, but you want to date women, but by dating women, you mean not dating them. You mean having sex with them and not dating them. Is that wait? This is my pet peeve. And I get like because I'm a very like romantically focused person. I when people say date, but then when they really mean is they want to fuck and then have nothing else to do with that person in terms of a relationship, I'm like, why do you say date when what you really have is like a borderline friends with benefits relationship / you like sleep together when it both seems interesting? Like that's not what dating. Like if you just go out to dinner before you fuck and it's like it's foreplay, to me that's not a date, it's just foreplay. But like I feel like dates implicitly to me have a romantic connotation to them, but that's my own like mental framework there. You can't tell if you or your partner will feel something more than sexual attraction if you're not up to something more. Maybe Polly's not sure. Isn't that just hooking up or a relationship? Yeah. So okay, I'm a heterosexual woman, but curious in dating women. How can I be sure I want to try casual poly relationship with sex only? How do I go about meeting people to try with? Dating apps are the way that you find people. Field or OkCupid would probably be the easiest way. That's the easy part of this. So just like answer that one really quickly. Casual poly relationships with sex only, but then also you want to date women. So this is where we get into kind of like a lexical. This is where we get into a lexical argument, a disagreement that people have in polyamorous spaces, let's say, and like open relationships in general. So for me personally, I consider like non-monogamy, open relationships, I consider that to be like the umbrella term, right? Open relationships versus non-open relationships or monogamy. And polyamory is one way of doing an open relationship type. But polyamory, to me, in my conception of it, is seeking out additional dating relationships. Not like casual, not like having a dyad, having, you know, a dating pair where occasionally you sometimes fuck people when you go on vacation, or like when you're on a business trip, like you take someone back to your, like it's not where it's like I have a main partner I'm romantically and sexually into, but then sometimes we kind of dabble outside of that sexually. To me, that's not poly. That's just an open relationship, or, hooking up or things like that. Polyamory to me is like wanting to date multiple people and have like two boyfriends or two girlfriends, like people that you have a level of entanglement with, either that like a queer platonic sort of relationship or like a romantic relationship, or just something where you're more connected than just like casual occasional hookups, right? To be fair, dating is really the only acceptable expression of desire. I mean, I guess, but like my experience on dating apps with the people is that like a lot of them only want, they don't want to date. They want to be taken out to dinner and then they want to have sex, which is different. Like at least in my experience, a lot of people are like, I'm only here for sex. I'm here because sex is interesting to me and I want to have it. And they don't really like, maybe the framework of like meeting up for dinner or like a date before, like going out to lunch or something is like the prelude to have a conversation first, is like the framework. But like I don't really think that, like, at least in my experiences with like open relationships and poly people, I don't really think a lot of people feel like beholden to like, oh, I have to date people in order to be able to have sex with them. Like I don't really see people feeling like, I don't know, trapped by that, I guess. Swinging is when typically married people swap partners in like some degree. And like I'm not an expert in swinging. Swinging is a different type of an open relationship. It has its own community, its own culture. Consent is dubious. Typically involves a fair amount of like substance use, tends to skew pretty exclusively like early middle aged, like well off white people, more or less. So swinging I'm not an expert in, but typically it's when you have married people or like closed dyads or something, where one member of the dyad has sex with like another party. Either like both people swap and they have sex with like the other partner, like my wife goes with your husband and your wife goes with me. Like it's like both things, they do like a thing called a full swap. Or there's like soft swapping. There's like where you like, I don't know, it's confusing. But like that's not what I think this is about, because it's about like you just have the sex. The romantic relationship is closed off, but it's about like casually having sex as like recreation and not really having a relationship further than like casually meeting at a bar or like maybe friendship being attached to it. Women loving women dates, especially first dates, are 8+ hour affairs by the end of which you know everything about your new partner, at least in my experience. I think my problem is that I date all people like I'm dating women. I date everyone like I'm dating a woman. And I don't know what that says about me, but in my experience, like the way that I have a lot of first dates, regardless of the person's gender, is like we go out to like a board game place or coffee or something, and then we talk for like 4 hours maybe, or we go on a walk somewhere, we have a picnic, like we have something where it's a little bit more casual, because I try to fucking avoid the like the dinner and then navigating sex afterwards like the plague. So I try to pick things where it's going to be nominally more difficult for there to be the expectation of like sex coming at the end of that. And for me, the way that's worked has been like, let's go on a picnic, let's go on a walk around the lake, let's pick pumpkins. Like, just something where it's a little bit like lower key. There's a particular activity to do and it's centered around that. And I like my experience with men, doing that with men, has been a lot of them come back and are like, do you really like me? Like, I'm confused. Like, how do you? And I'm like, is this because I didn't like offer to suck your dick in the parking lot? Like, I feel like that's what it comes down to, is like, if you don't like, and this is my own jaded experience as an asexual, because I'm sure some people would be like, man, if I had the opportunity to have sex with literally anyone, I'd feel so lucky. And I don't mean to, like, I don't know if this might come across as like, I don't know, first world dating problems, but like a lot of people get disappointed when like you don't like, the bare minimum, it seems like, is that you should be like deep kissing at the end of the first date, or like like, you know, or it seems like of course there's going to be sex afterwards because we're from sex positive spaces, and and then it's like, okay, well, I don't want to suck your dick in the parking lot, sorry, it's not going to happen. I don't know you well enough to do literally anything else. I want to know who you are emotionally, okay? Like, that's my priority, is like, what are your values? What are your goals? Where do you see your life going? What kind of relationships are you looking for? What's your experience with BDSM? What do you think about my job? Is that weird for you? Are we compatible? Like, I want to know about your life history and your story and your goals and your values. The last thing I want to know about is how big your penis is or what size of dildos you use. Like, I don't care. I don't care. So, my first day with my husband, we talked for 4 hours straight and then didn't have sex until we were dating for 2 weeks. See, that's like my ideal, is like, I want to talk with somebody for a really long time. And I like the slow build up of like the physical intimacy in tandem with how connected with I am with the person. Because it's so hard for me to feel like anything other than just like, I don't know, like a sex object. If somebody's like main goal of dating me is to get to sex as quickly as possible, I'm like, bitch, I don't know you. I don't want to know what your genitals look like. Like, I don't want you to come back to my house. I don't have to drive to where you live. Ugh, gross. I'm not gonna know. Like, there's a high barrier for entry for me when it comes to that. Yeah, a lot of people, and see, this is the thing. This is like I don't know how this squares with like monogamous dating, but poly dating and dating people that are into open relationships, sex is expected on the first date. Everyone that I've talked to, sex happens by the second date at the minimum. Which is like, how the fuck do you have time to like get tested, share results, like figure out if they can use latex or non-latex condoms? I don't know. But like, people are very motivated to get the sex as quickly as possible, especially in poly, which is like deeply alienating to me. I'm like, can we like at least wait until the fourth date? Like, because again, I am asexual. I have conversations with people about that. And like, I don't know. It's like, it's difficult because like, I'm not repulsed by sex. And so it's not like the idea of it isn't disgusting, but it's not why I want to date people. That's not my main motivation. It's not for a lot of people. And it feels very, it just feels like that. That's what it feels like. Same. I'm not interested in sex until we've been dating for at least like a month, if not more. Yeah, like, I want to make sure the relationship's gonna last before we do something like very intimate and personal. Which, and for a lot of people, it's just like, it's fun. They like coming. It's not personal in the absolute slightest. They're like, I don't know, it's just about getting off. And it's like, I want to have it. Like, listen, if I cared about that, I have sex toys. Like, whatever your genitals are, I don't need them. They're not important to me. I'm so sorry. It's more trouble than it's worth. That's what it really comes down to, honestly, is it's more trouble than it's worth. The second date, my God, I'm a poly prude. I wait forever. Yeah. It's a weird pressure. And like, I talked about this. I did a video recently where I was featured in another YouTuber named FD Signifiers. I did a video on like sex and conservatism. And I talked about how in like woke or like left-leaning cultural spaces, of which I consider poly and open relationships to be a part of that, I do feel like both there's those like, you get these people who react like, oh my God, people only talk about poly like it's supposed to be this pure love thing, and stop being prudish. It's okay to be into poly because you like sex. And then it's like, well, I don't know anyone who's saying that. I've literally never interfaced with that, except for me maybe being like, hey, like, isn't it kind of strange that the default poly expectation is like vaginal intercourse on the second date and like a blowjob on the first, and anyone that you ever interface with that does poly, like, if you are in a poly space, like a poly meetup or a discussion group or something, if you're not available to date, i.e. fuck them, they don't care about your existence. Like, if you are not seen as a potential new partner sexually, people are very uninterested in a way that makes it very difficult to actually build a community outside of like the people you have sex with and the people that they have sex with all doing something together. Yeah. Yeah, it's not polysex, it's polyamory. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make people like I don't want to it's confusing cuz like there are a lot of people who are poly that definitely prioritize sex over relationships but still have relationships. And for me, that's like the important part of it is like are you casually having sex on the side with just like random people occasionally, or are you like building multiple relationships and like you are connected with these people's lives in some kind of like meaningful ish way? I don't know. Poly's complicated. Poly's complicated. I'm sure we'll get into that more, but yeah. I guess I didn't really even answer the actual question. Um, So you don't have to date people just to have casual sex with them. But I will say that most lesbians and most women loving women are very adverse to like straight girl in a monogamous heterosexual relationship that wants to have her experimentation with a woman phase. A lot of people are very adverse to that. I would caution patience is what I would say. You're gonna have to probably be very patient. People are probably not going to be very. Oh.
So, how the heck do you approach somebody if you actually want to know more about them? I'm lost.
Oh, I'm lost at the end. I will finish this thought and then we'll move on to that because that's a good question. How do you actually approach somebody if you actually want to know more about them? Like, okay, so like you can meet other people and like, oh, I want to experiment with women. Honestly, my real advice is if you want to experiment sexually with a woman and you don't want to date them because it's gonna blow burn, hire a sex worker. Hire a sex worker. Just go on Twitter, find a sex worker. Okay, they're all over. They're everywhere. They walk among us, the sex workers. And let me tell you, every single like I don't want to stereotype, but almost every single pro dom I know is a queer woman. Most of the women I know that work in the sex industry in some capacity are not strictly heterosexual and like working with female clients. So if you want to not date someone but see what it's like to have sex with a woman because you're experimenting even though you're heterosexual, you can hire like an escort. You can take a girl out on a date to like have coffee and then like see her dildo collection. That's a thing you can do. And it's probably easier and will take less time than like sorting through 10 million matches on OkCupid and Field that won't go anywhere because they don't want to be associated with they don't want to date someone or be somebody's like sexual experiment, you know? That makes me sad though. I'd want to get into poly to be with the people that I love and to experience more romance because my partner's on the aro spectrum. Yeah. I think there are people that are very much into poly for the romantic part of it. But my experience of it, and this is very much biased based on the segments of the community that I've interacted with, and I'm not saying this is universally true, but it does seem to be fairly true, is polyamory tends to be most appealing, it seems like, to high sex drive heterosexual men and sexually adventurous heteroflexible women. And so most people that are doing it are motivated primarily or mostly or like halfway by a high sex drive in enjoying sexual experimentation, having multiple partners, seeking novelty and like adventure seeking more so than the like I want to settle down and have a house with 3 people and we share a garden and we bake cookies together on Sundays. Like that tends to be less of the dream versus like I want to have threesomes. Most of the time is the initial thing. What if you don't have the money? Probably save up for it. I mean, like, at the same time, but it's like with inflation, like how expensive is a first date these days? Like if you're not splitting the check and you're like the dominant person or like the man in the relationship, like at least where I live, like a decent dinner at like a restaurant, and I'm a cheap date because I don't drink alcohol or anything. Like that's like $100, right? So it's like, what's better? Like hiring the person who's gonna give you exactly the experience you want and none of the stuff you don't want, or spending $400 on first dates that don't really go anywhere because you're not really compatible with the person. I don't know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Glad you can make it to the live stream. Welcome. All right, so moving on to the next question here. Oh, I gotta go back to the how do you approach people if you want to actually get to know them. I don't know if you know what I mean, like a munch or like in general. I'm not sure which. I'm trying to go back to. I just have like a window for the German word for sausages open on my Google Chrome right now. So I don't know if you mean like at a munch or like in general or like dating. I feel like the only way I know how to approach people is to do this. So, the what I do, because I don't know how to flirt, which I guess would be the other way of doing this, is I I try to start a conversation with somebody based on something that I can identify about them, and it depends on the person, right? Like if I'm approaching like a femme person, if I'm approaching like somebody I know is like a woman or is like femme and seems to like, put work into their aesthetic in some regard, I'll find something about them that I genuinely like, right? Like their hair or I try not to do things that are like things they can't change about themselves. So like maybe the way they style their hair or their outfit or the shoes they picked or like the color of your dress really complements your skin tone. Like I'll find something nice to say that's a compliment that I genuinely mean. And have that like open a conversation, and then maybe I'll ask a question about like how long have you been here, baby? But if it's like a community event or something, I'll maybe say something like, is this your first time? Like if I haven't seen them before, like is this your first time at an event, or have you been here before, or what made you want to come to this party, or there's something along those lines that's like it's low stakes, but it's a good way to open a conversation, and then just kind of go with where things go from there. Like I very much try not to put too much pressure on the person in terms of like expectations or where I want the conversation to go. I just like listen to them, ask follow-up questions, try to stay engaged, and just like ask them about like if it's at a BDSM party and stuff, why they're there, how long they've been in the community before, what their experience has been like, things like that. And just like kind of, if you're in a city, like, oh, do you live around here? Like, how long have you lived here for? Just things that kind of open the conversation up to like other stories and things and getting to know somebody more, basically. We're in the second hour. If you haven't, please consider clicking the like button. It lets the eldritch horror that is YouTube know to share this content with other people. Yes, that is very true. Please feed the algorithm so it does not destroy my soul. That would be beautiful. That would be wonderful. And also, I appreciate the time check. My partner is poly with 2 of us and has casual hookups with girls who only want sex and dates and not the relationship aspect with the rest of us. I mean, I think that counts as poly because it's like, okay, you're dating multiple people, but then also you have the casual hookups with girls who only want sex. If it was only ever that you had sex with casual people who only wanted to go out for dinner and then have sex afterwards, which is like, that's my least favorite way to have sex. Like, I'm just gonna be honest. I feel like the dinner sex combo is the worst. I feel like have a chill ass night playing video games together, watch movies, then fall asleep, then have sex in the morning, and then go out for breakfast. That is the underrated combination of events because you get to be intimate, you get to spend time together, you get to see each other in these like separate environments, and then like I feel like that's way better than like I feel like when you go out to dinner and you have drinks and like my last thing on my fucking mind at that point is like wanting to have sex. I'm like, digestion. That really turns me on. But that's me. That is me. I have a barefoot fetish. How do I bring that up to my new girlfriend? Is your girlfriend kinky? I feel like, this is my opinion, foot fetishes are very common. I have dated many, many men in my time with heel and foot fetishes. And you never know, your girlfriend might have experience with other men who have foot fetishes. But, okay. There's the ethical way to do this, and then there's the more dubious way to do this. So the way that a lot of people would try to do this, right, that's like very vanilla way of broaching this, is like you're having sex, you're doing your normal stuff, and then as part of the sex, like you start to like touch her feet during sex and then like see how she reacts to it, and then like talk about your fetish afterwards. I don't really feel like that's the way to do it. What I would probably do instead is I would be upfront about it. And this is harder if you're not used to like openly talking about sex. I have tried in the last like couple years of my life to be very open, especially with my partners, about sex and how we feel about sex and what we want to do next, what's working, what's not working. And so really anything is on the table for discussion, as far as like, you know, just like hanging out, and then like, you know, oh hey, I really like last time we had sex, we did this one position and that felt good. Okay, cool, let's try that again next time. How would you feel about, instead of this, we tried this? Oh yeah, that would be cool. Also, I noticed that like we can use the fireplace now. Wouldn't it be cool to have sex in front of the fireplace? Oh, that seems awesome, let's try it. Like it's like everything's on the table. It's not like weird or like awkward to talk about sex or like reflect on the sexes we've already had like recently. Like it's all like part of our relationship dynamic already. And so if you don't have that, I would maybe work on establishing more of an open communication line about your sex life and like what you enjoy doing and what you're into. And then it's easier to bring up like new things to that. And it might seem kind of weird and awkward if you haven't done it before, because it's like, what's wrong? Why do we need to talk about it? Nothing's wrong. Why do we have to talk about it? Like people get kind of like, I don't know, weirdly defensive about talking about sex. Like they think it's like you only talk about sex if it's bad, and if it's good, you just kind of keep doing it. And that's not true at all. Like I would just introduce it like, hey, I really love the sex we've been having together. This has been super fun. I think it would be even more fun. It would be even better if we could talk about it maybe a little bit more openly, and I would love it if we could have more of an open dialogue between when we have sex to make sure that we're having the best time possible. And then you can just, you know, debrief about the sex you had, talk about what worked, talk about what didn't, talk about what you want to try next time. And then kind of when you have that more open communication established, I think that's when you bring it up, where you know you have, maybe you have really awesome sex and you both had a really fun time, and then maybe then you bring up, oh, like I've been loving the sex we've been having, it's been really awesome. Something that I fantasize about a lot is getting to touch your feet. What do you think about that? And don't make it like a horrible confession. Don't make it like the hardest conversation ever. Just like bring up something you'd want to try. And like, I think if you just like, you don't have to say like, I have a deep secret, I have a fetish for feet. Like, you just like, you don't have to be dramatic. Just like, what would you want to do, right? Do you want to be able to massage her feet? Do you want to be able to suck her toes? Do you want to be able to just look at her feet during sex and like not have her wear socks? Just wear socks a lot around the house. Like maybe you bring it up, right? Oh, thank you, Knife Crow. Thank you for all the wonderful content. Your videos have been very informative and helpful. Awesome. I'm glad that you enjoy them. So I think you can also talk about it like I don't know. I have partners that don't have fetishes, but they still compliment my body like, oh, wow, your legs are super high. You have such long legs, and then you got your ass, and then you got this. And like, if you are somebody who communicates like that regularly, I feel like it's much easier to be like, damn, you have really sexy feet. Do you know that? Like, it's a lot easier to like bring it up in a way that doesn't sound like I have a clinical fetish and my needs must be met. Like, you know, like, I think if you just bring it up casually in the way that you would any other thing about sex you have interest in, it really puts the pressure off, and it like doesn't make it sound like a big, scary, horrible thing. But she also like might say no, right? She might be like, I don't know, it seems kind of weird, or I'm not really into that, or my feet are ticklish, or that seems awkward to me that you would sexualize that. And like, okay, if that's the response, then you're probably getting into like probably want to talk to a couples therapist about this for like a session or two route. Yeah. Definitely, it's very nerve wracking trying to discuss something like that with your partner, and once having your interests out in the open, it feels a lot better. Yes. I think the anticipation of talking about it is very hard, like compared to the actual conversation. Now, with certain fetishes and fantasies that maybe people would assume like meant bad things about them or your relationship, and I'm thinking of like, I don't know, like if you have a like a monster fetish or something. Like you're one of those people who's really into like monster dildos, and you're like, well, I can't really ever like become a dragon. Are you into bestiality? Like then that can be a really awkward conversation. But foot fetishes are so common, and like people already with their partners do stuff like foot massage and things. Like it's not really that much of a stretch. Like I don't think for vanilla sexuality to also include feet as part of it. Like doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me. And you never know, they may really be into it. Like there are a lot of women who would be like, I love that my boyfriend has a foot fetish because I get free foot massages all the damn time. Like there are a lot of women that would love that. Also, from my understanding from like people I know again that work in the sex industry is that like foot fetishist clients tend to be their favorites because they pay really well, and like they don't want to get anywhere near your genitals, right? They don't care about they don't care about, I don't know, taking a microscope to your vagina. Like they're just like, they just want to be near your feet, and it's you know, it's a relief sometimes. Yeah, make it part of an organic chat segue. The more specially announced it is. Yes, this is a really good way of putting specially announced. The weirder and more awkward it'd be for everyone. Yes, I'm trying to communicate that, but that's essentially what I'm trying to say is like, have that open dialogue be part of your relationship already. And then when you're in the middle of already talking about something else, like sex you just had or complimenting their body in some way, then you bring up the thing you want to bring up and be like, damn, you have really awesome legs, right? I bet your feet are awesome too. Like, I don't know. I'm really fucking awkward at this, so like don't take my word on like specific things to say, because you are asking an asexual woman that does not have a foot fetish how to communicate this. But I do think that you can talk about this in a way where it's not like the most awkward thing on the planet. It's going to like destroy your relationship, you know? Yes, one of my recent exes randomly licked my armpit and feet while we were having sex, and I was so shocked I couldn't say anything about it. Just please don't do anything without discussing it first. Yes, and this is why I think my first example I gave was like people that try to do this by like covertly during sex suddenly doing something, and that does not work most of the time, especially with licking. Like a lot of people are very sensitive, and they like, you gotta, people are ticklish. You can't just start licking them places. Like, come on. So I think it's good to negotiate up front first and talk about it ahead of time. And then you can build from there and make it a little bit more organic in the future. I'm not really sure if monster people are different from furries. I feel like there's a lot of overlap, but a lot of people just like monster stuff without really being into furries specifically. I don't know. It feels like a subset maybe, or a variation, but I'm not an expert on either, so I don't know. Anyways, good question. Let's move on to the next one. Not the licking. Oh, okay. So is it possible for a brat tamer to be so much bigger of a brat than the bratty submissive that the struggle is no longer there? Like, instead of a banter, the submissives gets bulldozed. Yes. That is true. I think really with like humiliation play and a lot of stuff. If you are ever, whether it be like rough body play and it's like a physical struggle or like a mental struggle with like humiliation, it is always possible to go too far too fast and like overwhelm your partner. So you do have to kind of pull your punches a little bit depending on the person. You might be able to go full on out there, be as brat tamey as you want to be, and your brat can just kind of take it and they can play off of you. But a lot of people, you'll need to kind of calibrate, right? Like either the brat has to kind of rein it in and they have to not struggle as much, or you as the brat tamer has to rein it in and not like bulldoze over them, because the fun is in the struggle, right? It's like, this is a bad analogy because I don't want to like infantilize anyone, but just like take it for what I mean it to be, right? Which is like, let's say you're an adult and you love Mario Kart. You've been playing Mario Kart for like 5 years, and then you like introduce your like nephew to Mario Kart, and he's like 5 and doesn't really know how to hold a controller. You can either decide to just lap him and get first place in Mario Kart as many times as you want, or you can spend your time helping them have a good time playing and not worry about first place and like kind of slow yourself down, or not worry so much about winning and focus more on the interplay together and enjoy that experience more than the enjoyment of winning. And so I think with brat taming especially, there can be this tendency to want to like out brat the brat so much that you kind of get like first place and are better than them. And if that's like too easy for you to do, if you end up like, again, just kind of like overwhelming them and being too much of a bigger brat, then it's not really fun for anyone. So, you know, the answer is like, yes, it's possible for a brat tamer to go too far. And that's true for like a lot of things involving struggle, be that like emotional, mental stuff like humiliation play, or more physical stuff like rough body play where you're, you know, wrestling and doing things like that, where you do have to kind of either hold back or you might have to like push farther than maybe you normally would to kind of calibrate it to make sure both people are getting the experience they want to have, if that makes sense. I think that sneezing fetishes are totally a fetish. There are people that are turned on either by sneezing themselves or by watching other people sneeze. I don't really have any other thoughts besides that. It's just a thing. It's a thing. I haven't seen it in real life before. I haven't known anyone with a sneezing fetish, so I can't really speak to it, but it is very much a thing. Hi Evie, I'm new to BDSM in general, and both me and my partner, who is much more experienced, are switches. Do you have any advice for becoming more confident for doming? Yes, I do. So that's wonderful. Awesome. Love your new adventure together. That's so fun. And having a more experienced partner does definitely help. So I think that the main thing that people get, well, there's a couple things. I think what people get wrong when they start to want to dom or top is they confuse being mean with being dominant. They don't educate themselves enough, and they bite off more than they can chew. So if you could solve those 3 things, it'll be much easier for you to develop confidence. Number 1 is, I do think that confidence is a function of time. I don't think anyone should start out doing BDSM being fully confident. And if you are, you're probably ignorant to how dangerous something can be or what risk you're really taking on by doing something. So I think you definitely need to be cautious about, you know, not being overly confident. So I'm not saying you should be completely, you know, perfectly confident whenever you do BDSM. That can actually end up being a bad thing. But for the first step, which is confusing being mean with being dominant. So, everyone has their own approach to being a dominant. Some are very caregiving and like mommy or daddy like. Some are very like cold and cruel, like a mean stepmother or a teacher or something. Others are sort of kind of in between, or it varies. Others are much more like, I want to teach you something. I want to help you grow as a person. I want you to learn a lesson. So basically, lots of different people can have different approaches of being a dom, and you need to find what that style is for you. And it may be very complementary to your own style as a submissive or as a bottom, where like you might be a very bratty submissive and be like a very bratty top. You might be very masochistic as a bottom and be very sadistic top, right? It can be kind of the completely other end of the field, right? Like maybe you're a service submissive and that's really all you do. But then when it comes to topping, you're really into like heavy impact play and bondage, even though you don't do that at all as a bottom. So what I would build off of next after that is like, okay, you found kind of what your style is, you found kind of where you want to go in terms of like what things interest you, you know, what your kind of persona maybe looks like. Then the next step is like education, right? Because I think if you know what you're doing, it's much easier to be confident, right? So like, don't go into a spanking scene totally blind, right? And just kind of winging it. Read books, go to classes, read blog articles, whatever it is that you want to do in a scene. You will most likely be more confident if you can read about it first, learn about it first, watch other people do it, practice it yourself, and then do it in a scene. And that'll help you feel a little bit less nervous. And then for the last part of it, which is not biting off more than you can chew, especially because you have a partner who's more experienced, you may look at the scenes that they do and sort of think, oh, I want to be able to do that. I should do that for my first scene. That seems like a lot of fun. And you don't want to walk before you can, you don't want to run before you can walk. You don't want to go too far too fast because it's going to be outside your skill set. You could get hurt, your partner could get hurt, and no one's going to have a fun time. So instead of trying to do everything all at once, I think something that can really help you build your confidence is learning how to do the smaller components individually and then later building those up into bigger scenes. I think this is really generally true for anyone getting into BDSM for the first time, or is just new in general, or is coming back after a long break. Is to start very small and very simple, right? Like just doing a spanking, just putting somebody in a blindfold and trying out, you know, a pair of handcuffs, just doing, you know, a sensation play scene where you have, you know, a feather tickler and an ice cube, right? Do something really, really simple, stick to like one area of BDSM, and then maybe like one or two sensations or implements within that. And just don't do too much, right? Keep it really short, keep it really simple, have those communication lines open. And then when you see, oh, I can do a scene where I spank someone for 20 minutes, or I give them 50 strokes with a cane, or I can tie them up using this particular knot that I practice. When you can see those individual skills work, then later on, you know, as you get into more complicated scenes, sorry, I don't know why. I've just had like every issue possible. And I'm hiccuping. Oh my God, that's like very intense. I don't know why. Why am I hiccuping? Yep. Okay. Sweet. That's what's happening. I swear to God, I hiccup like once a week now. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to try my best to like not have that like impact the stream too much, I hope. So I would build up those skills so that way when you get into larger scenes, there we go. Then when you get into larger scenes, you're not as overwhelmed by like trying to make every component work because you know they work individually. So then you can do bondage with impact play with the blindfold all together and have it work more harmoniously instead of like trying too hard to do everything at once. Yes, I don't like hard to do a live stream when I'm hiccuping, but I'm gonna try at least. Yep. Yeah. Okay. I'm curious, getting into kink, what scenes should I start with, or what scenes would you recommend to start with? I've kind of already touched on this, but I actually have some stuff next to me because I taught a class earlier today. But I really think like some really simple like sensor deprivation with like a blindfold, or like, I don't know, barehanded spanking for impact play, or like bondage tape. You can get like a roll of this for like $5 at like a sex toy store, like on Amazon. I would avoid like handcuffs, for example. You can have cuffs that are like this, but I wouldn't get like metal, like police handcuffs. So just stick to stuff that's simple, that feels pleasurable, and is not like too complicated or too expensive to do. And yeah, but it really depends ultimately on what your interests are in BDSM, because if you're only into bondage, Like if I tell you to try a spanking scene, like that's not really going to work. So I think really the answer is to find out what your own interests in BDSM are, be that role play, impact play, bondage, service, sexual control. I don't know, right? Find that and then like find like the smallest way to start trying that out for the first time, whether that be like, you know, I want to try bondage, so I'm going to get like a collar and like a pair of handcuffs and see how that feels. Or I want to try impact play, so I'm going to try, you know, a spanking and like a wooden kitchen spoon. I don't really think I can drink water upside down right now. I end them by holding my breath and just sheer force of will. Yeah. I don't really think, do any of those actually work for hiccups? I don't know, actually. I'll just try drinking some water. Sometimes I feel like giving myself a sternum rub helps. Nope, that didn't help at all. All right. Oh, I did have the tape and the cuffs during class. I did, it's true. Well, I hiccuped while drinking water, so I don't think that really did anything. Yep, that's what we're doing. I feel like they're farther apart now. I don't know. No trick-or-treating. I am too old to trick-or-treat. I don't have kids. But I would like to have some trick-or-treaters in my neighborhood, though. That would be fun. When will the replay for the 101 class be up? I think you should get a link to that tomorrow, but I'm not in charge of that. I didn't record it on my end, so I don't know exactly when it'll be out, but I will be posting a copy of my slideshow for it. Will be on my Patreon tomorrow. I don't know what costume I'm going to have Bandit in this year. I'll probably dress her up as a pumpkin this year, because I have a pumpkin costume already and it's obnoxiously cute. I wish if I could do anything. Oh, I wish I could dress. I don't even know. Like, hiccups. I mean, I know what a hiccup is. It's a spasm of the diaphragm muscle. Maybe it's because I've been talking a lot. I don't know. Okay, I feel like the breathing's helped, but I don't want to jinx it. So, they are hell. Yeah, so for Bandit's Halloween costume, I would love to dress her up as like a princess, or I don't know, like a princess or like a fairy would be I really want to get her like a cute like tutu with pom-poms on it, you know, and like a little crown or something, but she looks very cute as a pumpkin. So, I think any costume she can wear will be very cute. I should probably actually go look for a Halloween costume for her, because there are a couple of really cute boutiques, but I just have not had the time to like go out and go look for a costume, to be honest. I've never gotten hiccups from spicy food before. I don't know why. I've heard that happen, but it just hasn't happened for me. What do you think people in a relationship wanting to do BDSM for the first time and still learning, whether it's sexual or not? What do you think of people in a relationship wanting to do BDSM for the first time and still learn? I think it's fine. I think we all start somewhere. I think lots of people start doing BDSM when they're already in a relationship. Whether or not that is because of sex reasons or whatever, well, I don't know. It's not any of my business. I think that's great. I love it that people want to explore. Okay, this is where we got to the woman dating question. So I think I'm caught up at least. I probably did miss some stuff because, I had hiccups, so I apologize. Have you a moment to talk about BDSM? That's what this whole thing is for. So yes, I do, technically. For another 30 minutes, I have time. Thank you for the answer. It was very helpful. Hugs from Brazil. Of course. Hugs to Brazil. Thank you for being here. That's exactly what they mean. It's fucking and getting food. I mean, people like that. But honestly, I would kind of, to go back to that for a second, I feel like the better technique is like meeting up with somebody, having sex, and then ordering takeout so the food arrives when you're done having sex. Because then you don't like have to digest food while having sex, but then you still get to have the two pleasures together, That feels like a better technique to me. But whatever. I don't feel comfortable with dating apps. I mean, some of them are better than others. I mean, I wouldn't say that I love dating apps, but they're better than like meeting people at a bar. So, And also you get kind of people get to describe themselves, and I like that. So basically, find women you find attractive, ask them, do you want to go out for food and then have sex? And if they say yes, well, there you go. Easy. Yeah, exactly. It's so easy. You unlocked it. You figured it out. Who knew? Who knew that this could be so easy? To be honest, I've been thinking about dating to make friends. I have social anxiety and have trouble in group situations. I mean, a lot of people, I know, I think Hinge or Bumble, I know like Cupid, I think does this too. There's lots of apps that are for dating that also have like a friends version where you can use it to find friends. So don't ever let that. That's totally an option. And I think that a lot of people do prioritize dating relationships over friendship relationships. So if that's what you're looking for and what you want is friendship and what you want is companionship, like, yeah, a lot of people are going to look for dating first, and you might find that through dating. But a lot of people do want friends. A lot of people definitely want friends. I love friend dating. Just be open about not looking for sexual partners. Yes, for sure. Friend dating is awesome. It's a great way to get to know someone. Yes, as long as you have to be clear about if you're going on a date or like a friend date, I guess. But as long as you can do that, it's definitely an option. I've never dated that way. I'm 26. Is that what dating is now? I lol, IDK, I'm married. I think in certain spaces it is. I think in like polyamory, left-leaning spaces, it's very much like dating is a way to get to the sex, and like having lots of sex is good, and the goal, and sleeping around is valuable and good. Um, and it's weird. It's like the opposite of being prudish. Like, I feel like sometimes we've just replaced a social standard with a different, though possibly slightly less bad social standard, whereas before you were supposed to be a virgin and sex was a bad thing and your virginity had to be taken from you and you were supposed to only do it under very particular circumstances while you were married. And now I feel like we've kind of swung back in some ways to the other direction of this, where it's like everyone is supposed to be, if you're like a really, liberal minded woke person, and if you freed yourself from the patriarchy, you don't care about having sex, you just do it casually, it's everyone really wants sex all the time anyways, we're just sexual beings, blah blah blah. And it's about like having as much sex as possible, like casually, intimately, doesn't really matter. It's about the variety, it's about the ability to do it. And getting sex consistently from a lot of people is like weirdly important somehow. I don't know. I found structured group activities like D&D and card games helps with group-based anxiety. Yes, that's a really good technique. I know a lot of people that typically have anxiety or trouble making friends that have definitely made friends while doing like tabletop role-playing games or card games, and I recommend it. It works the same way with men on dates. We talked about earlier, like with women going on dates with each other, it's 8 hours long and all you do is talk. Except you ain't finding out shit. There will be hours of tangents about trains. Yep. I watched a cool YouTube video about this guy who did blah, blah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Hoping to get into D&D also. From what I understand, the nerdy, geeky community in my area is pretty abusive. Oh, that sucks. So I'm hoping to approach it through kink and hopefully find more open-minded people. Yes, I think that works great because kinky people tend to have higher standards, and a lot of them are nerdy anyways and want to do tabletop games. So you'll probably have just as much luck doing that as you would, outside of kink spaces, and probably a little bit safer. Also, if you want just a nice get to know you date, you need to make that clear as a guy. Dating has gone bananas. Is it because, has it been bananas, because of COVID, or is it just, been bananas for, 5 years and I didn't notice? That's what I want to know. What caused this? When did this start happening? I didn't even kiss my partner on the first date. We were both too nervous. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't kiss on the first date always myself. I don't know. The feeling has to be there. Sometimes I'll hug. Sometimes I'll do other stuff. But, I don't know, physical contact with strangers. Because I don't want there to be... I feel like you can put out signals by mistake with physical contact that I don't mean to, and so I'm very cautious about doing it and be like, I'm gonna do this, but it's not because I want to do this. And I feel like I have to just preempt everything with okay, I know that for most people, if I do or say this thing, it secretly means I want to do this other stuff. But if I kiss you, all I want, I'm not thinking of anything else. I'm not trying to get anywhere else. All I'm doing is the kissing, and that's it. That's where it ends, okay? And I feel like that's a very novel thing for a lot of folks. I need to be ready to know if I'm getting the U-Haul by date 2 or not. Otherwise, it's an unsuccessful date. That's hilarious. That's great. Well, I'm glad we are amongst like-minded folks with the slow burns and the wanting to wait. That's awesome to know we're not alone. That is a very detailed steak emoji. How is that? It looks almost kind of gross because it's very visceral looking. You can see the marbling of the fat in it. Google went hardcore with their steak emoji. My goodness. How many dates until doing a scene, though? I mean, personally for me, or for people in general. So that totally depends on the context of the date. Because if it's a date to meet up to talk about doing a scene, we might do a scene the next time we go to a party. Typically, if I'm going on a date with the intention of scening with the person, it's because we're gonna go to a public play space and do a scene there. And it's not I'm gonna go to your house, it's gonna be private. Unless I've already been dating somebody for a while, I typically don't go to another person's house for BDSM for any reason. Because why? It just seems like a bad idea, and I have other options locally for going to places to do scenes at. So if I am meeting up with somebody to talk about BDSM because we both want a scene together, then what I would do is a one date to talk about doing a scene, and then the next date, if you want to call it that, is doing the scene. Now, if it's somebody I'm interested in dating romantically, that's a pretty long process. I can't really put a timeline to it, but I would need to be able to go over to their house at least once before scening with them, especially if we're going to be playing in private. So I would say at least 4 dates, but probably more 10. But probably more 2 months. Just because that trust takes such a long time to build up, and I'm not trying to get, sub frenzy mode, I prefer to take my time and really talk it out and make sure we have, the correct expectations, and we're not, confused about what we both want from a relationship. I really want to make sure that foundation is really solid, and I definitely trust this person before I have a scene with them. I love this way of phrasing it. As a demi, sex is the fun, unlockable bonus content after the main campaign. Yes, that's beautiful. That's a great way of phrasing it. That's so true. Thank you, Evie. You worded that way better than I could. And by better, I mean nicer. I try. Listen, they pay me for something, right? Uh, the first live I've actually seen live. Woohoo. Well, welcome. Glad you could make it. Any advice on transitioning from submissive to slave? It's difficult to find resources for this specifically. It really is. If you haven't read Dan and Don Williams' book, which is, what is it titled? Living MS. I don't know. They just published a new book and it's called Hearts and Collars. So, my advice, because what you're functionally asking is how do you move from a partial power exchange relationship, and also whoever suggested in the comments to do deep breathing exercises, that fucking worked. Like that's never, I've never done anything before that's helped hiccups. That was OP. I feel like I just hacked my brain. That was awesome. Kudos for you. Applause, round of applause, yay. But for transitioning to a relationship that is partial power exchange to total power exchange, I'm sure that different people have different ways of doing this. Like, I know a lot of people that, like, are MS educators where their advice is just like, I don't know, we just did it. Like, they didn't, like, slowly dip their toes in, and then they gave up this, and then they gave up that, and then slowly over time, they gave up everything before they even realized it. Like, it was a very concrete, we tried a partial power exchange relationship, that didn't work for us, and then we just went whole hog, and that's what we have to do. So gradual transition is not typically what a lot of folks end up doing. But I think for me, if I was in your position and I wanted to transition from a submissive to a slave, I would think about, what are my roadblocks? What are my fears, right? If I want to be in a total power exchange relationship, an MS relationship with this person, what is preventing that from happening? Do I maybe not trust them about how they manage finances? Am I worried that they might tell me to cut off all my hair and I'm still really attached to that? Am I worried about what it might mean socially for my other relationships? Am I worried about what my family might think if they find out about it? Am I worried about, if I would be able to leave or if I might become over dependent? And kind of try to sort those into like solvable versus unsolvable versus irrelevant problems, because you can have issues that are issues but they're not really relevant, right? Like, you already do BDSM, so how much does it really matter like what your family thinks of a slave versus a submissive? It's probably all the same to them. What's more maybe like relevant is like if you're worried, like what might be a legitimate worry that's worth addressing as relevant is like worrying about how they manage the finances, right? Can you do something about that? Is that actionable? Can you have a conversation about like money management or values that you have around that to make sure you're going to be on the same page? Because functionally what you're doing when you're transitioning from submissive to slave and you're giving up all of your authority and all of your power is you are giving up your life to that person in a way that really involves a lot of trust and requires having shared values, shared expectations, shared goals. And if you have mismatches around that, like if you really value saving money and you're prioritizing saving money so you can retire early, but they spend money as soon as it comes in, that's going to cause a lot of conflict. So I have to think about things that are like addressable problems that can be resolved, and then things that maybe can't necessarily be resolved, right? They're sort of like implicitly part of this kind of agreement, right? Where maybe you're worried about like, well, they might tell me to like cut off all of my hair. Then you have to evaluate, okay, is that really going to happen? Is that likely? they like my hair being long, would they kind of just arbitrarily decide to cut my hair just for funsies? Are they that kind of person? Do I really trust them with that? And like ultimately, what it really comes down to is, do you have the trust to be okay with the things that maybe make you a little bit uncomfortable if they were to happen, though they are likely not? And can you work on the things, or maybe you have a little bit of like issues or worries about like, well, I really like it if we could do this as part of our MS relationship, but this kind of worries me. How do we navigate that? And then go from there. So I did think going into it slowly would be better, but yes, maybe just going into it would be better. Like fully all the way. I mean, it's really up to you, right? I think it's worth like, so the reason I bring up this like sorting of like fixable, non-fixable, irrelevant issues is if you have like 5 things that are fixable or communicable, whatever, you have nothing that's like unsolvable, and like 2 things that are kind of irrelevant, you probably can just make the leap into just doing it. And you're probably gonna, you know, as long as you have that deep basis of trust and you've been together, which you're married, so like you've been like, I'm not worried about you as far as that's concerned. Oh yes, Twixie. I remember your previous question. I will get to that. I will get to that next. With the your kink is not my kink, but your kink is still okay. That yeah, I'll remember that. But if you have like 15 things that are solvable, maybe, and then like 5 things that are kind of like unsolvable, and then like 10 things that are like maybe irrelevant but are still in your mind that you're worrying about, maybe it's worth kind of addressing the anxiety that provokes kind of the irrelevant fears to pop up, and then see if you are really compatible enough by testing the waters with like, okay, so one thing that's kind of solvable that I'm worried about is like them having control over my food intake, right? Like they can just tell me to go on like a vegan diet or tell me to eat a banana every day. Can I handle that? Can we talk about that? What do they really want to do with that? What's likely? And then navigate that kind of piece by piece and slowly work your way into it more with giving up more rules, getting more rules, but giving up more power and control slowly over time. It just sort of depends on like how close you already are to having an MS relationship, is I think ultimately what it is. All right, so how do I take a your kink is not my kink, but your kink is still okay, or is, I think just is okay, approach to things that make me very uncomfortable. Sissies being a big one. As a trans woman, I tend to have a visceral reaction dealing with them, and I want to change that. Well, I think it's awesome that you want to change that. I think it's a very common reaction for a lot of people that are trans to have that reaction to sissies, or a lot of women in general, like just find that sissies make them uncomfortable. I think it's a very common response. You're definitely not alone in that by any stretch of the imagination. There's other types of BDSM play I'm not going to get into, but also is like fairly common. So what I would say is dealing with them sort of interesting, because I'm like, do you see them in person like ever? Are they in your like community spaces? Do you have to be around them for like events? Do you know one like personally? Because I wouldn't like, I honestly, I would not recommend dealing with like sissies online, because a lot of sissy stuff, as is true for a lot of things involving male submissives, is very like sex and fantasy focused. It's not really like an accurate way of like interfacing with people that also are into sissification or like sissy stuff. So what I would do instead is like, if you have to be around them like in person, like I'll give an example here. So before I moved, there was an event that used to happen at one of the local dungeons, and it was an orgy party. And I am an ace person. I'm not averse to group sex, but not really into it. And if I wanted to kind of get over maybe some of my discomfort around group sex and like people masturbating openly and things like that, like I would volunteer for an event, right? Like I would be the door person, I would be on cleanup crew or setup crew or something like that, where I could be in the space and like be around people that were into that thing and like watch it without necessarily having the pressure of like going to that event as an attendee and like having a concrete other job I was supposed to be doing to help out, to sort of like distract myself with if it became uncomfortable, but then also getting the opportunity to like talk to people and get to know people and kind of pull back that veil a little bit. So if you have maybe an event near you, like be a femdom event or like a male sub party, anything really that involves male subs, is there's probably going to be sissies involved on some level. So maybe what I would do is I would like try to, or even like a munch, maybe that's like a femdom, like male submissive munch. Maybe meeting people that way, it's even outside of a dungeon or a scene context, where you can get to know people that are sissies and like talk to them, get to know them as people, and kind of maybe more understand like what their motivations are and why they're into that. And then you can go into like going to parties and watching scenes involving it, and then just kind of understanding it through observation and conversation a little bit more, and hopefully that'll help. But obviously if it makes you uncomfortable, like you're very much not obligated to like be around it or explore. I think it's really awesome you want to, but like if it's a hard limit for you to be around sissies and you don't want to even see it, that's also totally okay. All right, we got 10 minutes left here, so I'm going to take probably a couple more questions depending on how much rambling we get up to. We will see. If possible, go to a video game arcade, public place, and video games. Oh, that's such a good idea. That's a great one. Great option for dates and vetting people and meeting people. The other day I was reading an erotica and it was pretty nice. There was this detail about the protagonist having joint problems that require supportive garments, including on her wrists. But then the woman she's hooking up with uses her belt as handcuffs? And I'm like, wait, why mention the protagonist's joint problems just to cause nerve damage? I skimmed the rest and it wasn't addressed. I feel like that's like, because I know people that have like carpal tunnel and stuff where they have to wear like the supportive garments to prevent their carpal tunnel from getting worse. Or they've had like, you know, wrist surgery or something for it and they have garments for that. And yeah, that is a very weird thing to do in a novel, is be like, look, I'm going to draw attention to this thing, and then I'm going to do something that you definitely shouldn't do involving that thing, and then never address it. Like, yeah, if somebody has a wrist injury, I would not recommend using a belt as a pair of handcuffs. I would say that's probably going to be a no for me, boss. Sorry. How could I negotiate a scene if I have a disability that impairs my ability to speak, or kink and disability in general? I do have a video about this, not related to speech impairment, but that is definitely something that you can work through. A lot of people do use like forms and checklists for getting out the details of what they want to do during a scene. You know, be that what roles are being done, what activities are done, limits, boundaries, preferences, where the scene is happening, when, how long, all of those details. You can definitely write all of that down and have it just be back and forth over like an email, or I don't know if it's like you can't, like you're like selectively mute, or kind of what the situation is, like how much you can speak, if at all, or if it's just like an impairment of some kind. Like on a maybe more like a mild basis besides just like complete loss of speech. But like forms are really helpful. You know, negotiation checklists are really helpful. And then also like during the scene, like for safe words, like you can use safe signals, right? You can use like hand flashes or squeezing things, or like, you know, something that like you can drop that jingles, or like you know, like a bouncy ball or something. I'm trying to think if I had like a good example of something you could use for that, but I don't actually have one near me. But there are definitely ways to work around that. I think you would just have to understand, I'm sure that you do, that you are playing at a little bit of a higher danger level just because of that limitation on communication, but you can definitely overcome that and compensate for that. And build in other ways to still have that in-scene communication and check-ins and safe words and all of that stuff without having to worry about necessarily anyways your ability to speak. So that is very much a possibility. And I don't know anyone in the scene that just has a speech impairment. I only know people, I know deaf people, I know people that are blind or like partially blind. I know people in wheelchairs. So there are definitely lots of people in the scene that have all different sorts of disabilities. And yeah, they just, you know, it's part of life and people definitely work around it. Or at least they can. Not everyone's super nice about it. Not everyone's great, but like you at least have the ability to, you know. If sex is usually expected on first dates and it's not something on the cards, how do you set expectations without a blunt, hey, I'm not having sex with you out of nowhere, haven't ever really dated seriously, so that's a concern of mine. So the way that I handle this is in my profile, I don't necessarily say I'm asexual because most people don't know what that means. And so just like throwing out the term is not really helpful. But I will say that like, you know, depending on the app and sort of like what types of people are on the app, like on Field, I'm very blunt. I'm just like, I'm not here for sex. I don't want one night stands. I'm not here for hookups. I'm not here for friends with benefits. I am here to date, to find relationships and find people to do kinky stuff with. And that's my priority. So I just say in my profile, so maybe it seems less personal. And so people will hopefully self-select based on that. And we'll just go, oh, this person isn't here for sex. And like the way you talk about what you want in your profile in general is like really helpful. And I find that what is easiest is maybe not even necessarily having to have a very blunt, like, I don't want to have sex, but it's like, you know, this is what I want in my life. This is what I have currently. This is what I want to build. And if you don't ever bring up sex and you talk about like, my favorite first date would be to go to a video game arcade, right? Like if you talk about things that are anything other than sex, I think that'll probably help you out in terms of people kind of getting the vibe of like, oh, they don't really seem to care about sex. They say they're here more for dating or romantic relationships or finding a partner and not necessarily about, you know, other stuff. That is what I would do without having to have like that set expectation conversation. I don't think I've ever like, I don't think I've like explicitly told a person before a first date I'm not gonna have sex with them. But if during the planning of the first date they seem to be really pushing towards like wanting to have sex and they seem like they're planning that, I either will just be like, hey, I don't really think that we're that compatible. It seems like we kind of want different things out of this experience that I'm not really comfortable with. Or I would kind of make sure they know, like, hey, I want to check in. It kind of seems like sex is something you assume is on the table for this date. Is that the case? And then you sort of, as opposed to you kind of saying, we're not going to have sex, you open up that conversation with that curiosity about like, where is this? Like, am I right? Is this what you're kind of expecting? What are you hoping to get out of this? And then if they say, no, I just want to make sure you know the possibilities open and I'm taking the steps necessary to make sure that can be something if you also want it. Or it can be like, of course, the only reason I want to go on a date is to have sex. Okay, well then you know your answer. And then you put it on the other person to sort of answer for themselves what it is that they're looking for and what they want versus it all having to be on you to kind of set the boundaries around that. But just, you know, pay attention to their language, pay attention to their behavior, how they act, what they seem to be like. I don't know. I feel like the way people communicate is very individual. Like, I have sort of a sense of like how people talk to me before a date and kind of where it's going to end up. Like if somebody is like sending me a lot of pictures before a date and they seem to want to primarily communicate over pictures and they're telling me a lot about, you know, their past experiences and they're saying they're going out to get testing done, like that kind of more seems like they expect sex is going to be on the table versus somebody who's just like, hey, what's your Halloween plans? What are you doing? How was your weekend? How was visiting your family? Like whatever. That seems to be more indicative to me, at least of somebody who's more interested in a dating relationship versus only prioritizing sex. But it's complicated. All right, I think we have time for one more question. We're on the feet. We're on the feet conversation. Love your videos, and I can't wait for you to put out more. You've helped me start exploring my more unknown side with my husband. We're going to our first event tomorrow. Oh, congratulations. Felicia? Congrats. Yay, love it. So fun. Be safe. Have a fun time. You love to see it. We love seeing first events, people. It's such a great time. Do you have any tips for a relationship between two switches? We both we both want to bottom. Flip a coin. No, I'm kidding. Honestly, sometimes that is the solution, is you schedule it. No, really, I think that a two switch closed relationship can be really difficult, especially if you are both leaning towards the same side of the slash. So usually what that means is like either having some kind of schedule or negotiating something where it's like, if you put out this sock, if you give me this cup of coffee, that means today you want to do this thing, right? So really it's about kind of negotiating and having a really open conversation about like, hey, my needs aren't being met, and figuring out where that line is versus needs aren't being met versus I'm just not bottoming as much as I want to. And you want to get to a place where ideally both of you are getting your basic needs met, but you're not necessarily putting each other at the same time. It's not an easy thing to do, and I wish I had more time to maybe get into this, because I'm sure we have switches in here that I've tried to successfully or not perhaps navigate this particular problem. But it might also just be like you both bottom to each other at like the same time, or you do like really quick scenes where you get to switch like back and forth, or you kind of make it into fun games, right? Like you do like kinky twister or connect the dots or like checkers or something, where whoever wins gets to bottom, and whoever loses has to top, or whoever wins gets to pick which role they're playing. And that can be a really fun way of having like sort of a date night, but then also like playing games, and also kind of having a fun way of like figuring out, and unless one of you has like a huge advantage on games of chance for some reason, or one of you is very flexible and is much better at twister, a fairly even chance of getting to pick what your preference is in the moment. But then you also get to have fun together outside of just like what can be kind of a draining process of you both kind of competing to get your needs met, right? My favorite color is purple and black. Those are my two favorite colors. Yeah, Vera knows. Vera was like, I got this. Yeah, a kinky game of hide and seek. That's a good one. But it doesn't really work as well like with two people, because then one person's always doing because don't you always end up like eventually finding the person? Like they can't hide that good. Like as adults, right? Like as kids, I feel like it's easier to trick people. Like unless you're leaving the building, it's a little bit harder to just like do a game of hide and seek where somebody can't find you. Anyways, that's going to be it for tonight, guys. Thank you so much for being here and helping me with my hiccups and answering and helping me answer questions and asking wonderful questions. I very much enjoyed this. I do these streams every Friday at 6, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see more. I love getting to these. They're my favorite thing to get to do is answer your questions. And I'm trying to think of anything else that's coming up. Sunday, the 30th, we are doing a Halloween movie night on Patreon. That is for anyone, any tier on Patreon to come join us. I have a bunch of Halloween content planned. I am so excited for you guys to get to see all of that. I have some fun things in the works that I hope you all will enjoy. And again, thank you so much. And yeah, I will hopefully see you all again soon.